Today we'll discuss compositions. Cinema is the art of moving pictures. Whenever you point your camera at anything, you must ask yourself, what am I doing? If you're shooting a funny moment of your pet doing something silly to share with your partner, you don't need to worry about compositions. If, instead, you're making an Instagram reel and you want your video to stand out, you must learn about compositions. In this 11-episode course, we aim to make your first short film as an independent filmmaker with the tools you have, even just your phone. You must cover all the necessary roles and be the author, director, and also cinematographer, or DP, director of photography. A cinematographer, very much like an artist, utilizes a set of tools to paint a frame, like the artist would paint a canvas. Let's talk about the most important 8. Rule of thirds, depth, leading lines, symmetry, balance, dominant subject, headroom and leading room, breaking the rules. Rule of thirds. The rule of thirds is a fundamental principle of cinematic compositions. It involves dividing the frame into 3 horizontal and 3 vertical sections, creating a grid with 9 equal parts. It is based on the idea that the human eye is naturally drawn to points of interest along the grid's intersections. This means that you should position your subject at one of the 4 intersections on the grid to create a more dynamic and visually engaging shot. The rule of thirds also applies to landscapes and horizons, which should always be placed on one of the 2 lines going across for a more appealing image. There are occasions in which you may want to break this rule. For instance, look at this shot from this video, or this masterclass shot. Centering your subject automatically gives them authority. You put them in the center of the frame when they're talking directly to the camera, when you want to give them power, control, and supremacy, or when they're teaching. You may want to break the rule of thirds if you intentionally want to make your subject insignificant and meaningless. Depth. We need depth to create a sense of dimension and space. It makes our 2-dimensional videos more engaging and immersive for the viewers. While there are various techniques to create depth, we'll explore the most common and accessible ways that you could implement in your videos today. Depth of field. If you have a camera, the easiest way to create depth is by separating your subject from the background. To do that, you need to set your aperture to its lowest level. You can blur the background even more by shooting with longer focal lengths. We use a 50mm lens at 1.2 aperture in this example. Notice how a blurred background allows the audience to focus on our subject without any distractions that may occur in the background. By increasing the aperture, the camera will focus on everything we have in the whole frame, including this distracting guy, making all these weird faces, using the foreground. Another way to create depth is by taking advantage of the foreground. Find objects in the foreground and shoot through them. It will make your shots more compelling by giving them a nice 3-dimensional separation between the subject, the foreground, and the background. Pull your subjects away from the background to create space and dimension in your frame. This is easier if you're shooting outdoors or in large indoor environments. If you're shooting indoors, inside a small room for instance, create as much space as possible by filming from as close to the walls as possible, even if it is uncomfortable for you. Leading lines. A leading line is a visual element such as a road, a fence, or a river that leads the viewer's gaze towards a specific point in the shot. We use leading lines to help the audience understand which direction our subject is going and draw the viewer's attention to specific elements in the frame. Look for leading lines whenever your subject is moving or is about to move. You can also use leading lines to disorient your audience. In this sequence, our subject is escaping from this thug. She knows where to go, and the audience knows too, because we're using leading lines intentionally. If the story requires that our subject is lost, overwhelmed, and confused because she doesn't know where to go, we could simply remove the leading lines from our frame, or add many others so that she and the audience will feel that confusion. Symmetry. As humans, we love symmetry. Our eyes are naturally attracted to it. By adding symmetry to your compositions, you can make your shots visually striking and memorable. The good news is that symmetry is everywhere. When you're lucky, you only have to move your camera just a little to add symmetry to your shot. Look around you to find opportunities to create symmetric compositions in the environment you're currently shooting in. Balance. Your compositions won't be attractive, and trying really hard not to use the word cinematic, unless you balance things out. Look at this picture here. One half of the frame is taken up by our main subject. The other half is empty. You can balance your compositions by using props or the environment. To balance my composition, I added a prop light and a plant. I didn't need any of these props to tell my story better. Remember, studying compositions is all about making our pictures more pleasant, compelling, and engaging. Let's have a look at some examples of outdoors unbalanced compositions and how I managed to fix them by using the environment. Dominant subject. I see many filmmakers making this mistake. Our actress is the main subject in the frame. But if the compositions are full of distracting elements, not only will we confuse our audience, but we will also lose their attention by providing elements that will attract their eyes. This principle is also valid for non-human subjects. Look at this drone shot. I want you to focus on the house. That's right. Which one? This is confusing. Ensure that all your compositions have a clear dominant subject, making it easy for your audience to understand what they are supposed to look at. Headroom and looking room. In filmmaking, we call headroom the amount of space between the top of the subject's head and the top edge of the frame. The amount of headroom used to frame your subjects affects their importance or significance within the scene. A subject with too much headroom can feel small or insignificant, while a subject with too little headroom can feel cramped or claustrophobic. In an interview, you'd usually film the main character by placing their eye level at 2/3 of the frame, avoiding too much or too little space between their head and the top of the frame. Looking room, also known as eye room or sightline, is the space between the subject's gaze and the edge of the frame. You want this space to be 2/3 of the frame. The use of looking room is not always necessary or appropriate in all shots. In some cases, a tight framing that emphasizes the subject's gaze can be more effective than providing excessive looking room. The decision of how much looking room to use in a shot should be based on the desired effect and the overall visual composition of the shot. Breaking the rules. All the rules are meant to be broken, but you can only break something that you've built first. Breaking the rule of composition should be done intentionally and with a clear understanding of the principles being broken. So, unless you know what you're doing, stick to the rules. And that's all I have for you, folks. As usual, you can find the link to a PDF in the video description to be used as a quick reference for your filmmaking. Put this stuff into good use for your short film and stay creative. Hey, if you have any questions, you know where to find me. I love you, and I'll see you soon.